The meeting is now streaming on YouTube.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening and welcome to Northampton Borough Council Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Item number 1, apologies. I've received apologies from Councillor Roberts. Are there any more apologies this evening? No? Okay, item 2, minutes of the last meeting held on the 8th of June. Do you agree that I can sign those as a true record of the meeting?
Yes, Chairman.
Yes.
Yeah, agreed.
Thank you. Deputations and public addresses. I believe there aren't any members of the public wishing to speak this evening. Declarations of interest or voting on any of the items in this evening's meeting? No? Okay then. Item number 5 is the budget scrutiny. And this is a report that we've asked to be brought to us due to the current climate with the COVID-19 and the change from the Northampton Borough Council to West Northants Unitary Council. There are some concerns there about if we were still on track with the budget or whether there was any shortfalls. So I'm going to ask Councillor Aldred and Mr McGregor if they'd like to present their report. This is item number 5.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'll let Stuart go into the detail first, and then I'll come in after and just give you an update on where we are as a borough.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Chair. There were 2 questions you set. One was in respect to the West Northants Shadow Authority budget, and as per the report, as a borough CFO, I have limited view of the new council's future budget and the costs. But I did receive a message from the Chief Exec to highlight that overview and scrutiny for the Shadow Authority is being formed or up and running, and I understand Councillor Birch is the lead and yourself, Chair, is the deputy. So other than the large numbers that I see that we include in our budget, which is the actual cost we've committed, the details really for West Northants would fall to your other ONS role.
Okay, thank you very much, Stuart. So the report does say actually that 2.3, I think it is, that there is no additional requirement for NBC to contribute any more funds at the moment. And if we did have to, it would go through full council as a matter of course. Is that correct? That's correct. Yeah, it would have to actually go through full council as opposed to just cabinet. And obviously all councillors would have an interest, and I suspect the audit committee and the scrutiny committees for the shadow would have wanted to understand why first as well. Thank you. Yes, I'm sure it's on the agenda for our working meeting on this later this week, I think it is. Any questions to Stuart or Councillor Aldred on this? We all have that report. Okay. On the second part was the financial impact of COVID-19 on the council. Obviously, Cabinet received a report on the 27th of May. It's due to receive another one next week. The key issue that we don't have any details on yet is the latest government announcement on its funding proposals, which we believe will have a material impact for us, particularly around the fees and charges. So although we've got reasonable costs associated with COVID and we received the 2.3 million of grants so far, one of our biggest budget risks is actually loss of fees and charges, where we've had to continue with the costs of the car park through business rates, utilities, insurance, etc. But we obviously have no income, and we're hoping that what the government announced will actually translate into some form of funding that will alleviate the core of our pressures. My understanding is that we may have another cabinet now in August, by which time we hope to actually do a Q1 and then usually a period 3 budget monitor, so that cabinet and council are kept up to speed. The period 2 one that's going forward to next week misses the detail of the new government funding because there is no detail at the moment. So we're hopeful by the time we get to a budget monitor in August, we'll actually have some finer detail and can provide a bit more assurance that we are okay.
Okay, good. Thank you very much, Stuart. Any questions to Stuart? Meredith?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I did notice a question for Stuart. I noticed at the last meeting that I attended, there was £1.5 million was generated from the green waste collection. I was wondering if Stuart could tell me, is that going into the budget, or is that going to be spent on different projects to do with recycling?
I can answer that one, Chair.
Budget.
That was actually assumed in the budget. So what the 1.5 million is the gross. The net amount is on track to cover the budgeted value. Possibly we may be slightly ahead of track, but that will help us. But that was always assumed within the budget already.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Any further questions for Stuart or Councillor Aldred? No?
No, just to
Okay.
say, Chair, if it's all right. Obviously, we've got Cabinet next week. We'll have a lot more detail. That we'll have a little bit more detail. I won't say a lot more, but the one in August will be the one where we have obviously a lot more detail to share with everybody and what the outline and what sort of costings we're looking at to take out reserves. So, I mean, what I would emphasise to everybody is don't panic. We have got the money in reserves if the worst case scenario comes forward, and we'll be okay. But obviously, we're waiting for the government to see if they'll chip in a bit more money to help us out through this last 4 months.
Okay, thank you very much, Brandon. Thank you. Okay, item number 6 is the monitoring of accepted recommendations. And we've had the update emailed to us this afternoon. So I appreciate that members may not have had time to go through the report. So I'll hand over to Phil Harris, who's going to present it. I think, Dennis, this is the one that you chaired. It was a number of years ago now. It's the child sexual exploitation overview and scrutiny. And just having a very quick glance at the report, most of the monitoring of it is either completed or partially completed. So we'll be going through it later to make sure that all the recommendations are completed. So Phil, I'll hand over to you to present the report, please.
Are you asking me to present the report?
No, I'm asking Phil Harris to present the report.
Okay, thank you. So thank you, Councillor Lane. Apologies for the late circulation of the report. I'll talk people through that and obviously take any questions at the end. This has taken longer with other things as well, although the issue is as important to us, to me, as it has ever been. So if we go through the recommendations, some of the things are quite easy to do, but we wanted to link them in with training, which I'll talk through. So on the recommendation 1, that was about establishing an officer group to work on CSE. That's been established. We haven't met during COVID, but the next meeting is in August. And the second part of recommendation 1 was to develop an action plan. So picking up on some of those issues that are quite live, and we're looking to share that action plan and get it approved by the group for the activities that remain between now and vesting day. So just going to push on with some of that coordination. So that will be looking at things like obviously training, making sure there's an endorsement of that, looking at how issues are reported and incidents and how that's shared, seeing whether there are additional multi-agency initiatives where we pool resources and do particular projects. Those things have been going on anyway between the RISE team, the Reducing Incidents of Sexual Exploitation team, led by the police. But it's just finishing off that piece of work over the next 8 months to make sure that as we lead into Unitary, that we've done everything we can, and particularly in the action plan, there's some work we're going to be doing with Daventry and South North Hants ahead of Unitary, so that the good work that's been done already carries on. So that's on recommendation 1, but the work has been going on since the scrutiny. The second one was to review all public spaces that NPH and the council has. Actually, that work was done by the police and the CCTV team and the Community Safety Partnership and our own Community Safety and Engagement team. So what the police have is that intelligence-led, risk-based approach to monitoring of those public spaces. So based on the information they've got, which is dynamic risk assessment, they've kept on top of that. So we're not aware of any areas that aren't being monitored that should be monitored. The third recommendation was that was really to have quarterly meetings, and I think that's pretty relevant at the time, but that was quite a burden for the RISE team. So we do, as individuals, the different council services, we meet with the RISE team or officers from that team as and when it's needed. We're setting up a meeting in September where Ruth Austin, Vicky Rockall, and a couple of other colleagues in the council will meet with the RISE team to talk through, is there a need to have formal meetings and what frequency? But actually there hasn't been an issue up to now. We've met when we've needed to, but that was one of the recommendations, that to close this one down, we will agree with them what's required. Rather than just agree it on the phone or by email, we thought a meeting, because quite often when you do meet, you find that there are other reasons why that regular communication should take place. Okay. Recommendation 4. So this was during the scrutiny, we had a really good presentation from the e-safety officer who looked at safe internet use and advising young people and parents of the risks of online exploitation. And we were due to have a meeting just as COVID hit, but that meeting's now been reorganised, and we're meeting with colleagues and the RISE team in August. So what we intend to do, we've looked at the NCC website. They've got quite a lot of information for parents and for young people and for professionals on e-safety and the risk. There's a good one on Bernardo's, have got a useful guide on that. So we thought the best thing to do was to replicate the information or most of the information that is on the County Council's website, put that onto our own website in September where it's relevant, but also to have met with the safety officer to see whether there are other things that would be particularly relevant for the Borough Council to put on its website, because it was about, the intention was to look at what we could do proactively to promote safe internet use. It has been tended to be led by the County Council, but so that will be done for September, and that's in hand. And at the bottom of that section, recommendation 4, it appears in a number of places. We will be writing either towards the end of July or the beginning of August, writing to all members to invite them to a special spotting the signs training, which will be on safeguarding and CSE. It will be done at different times of the day. And that will pull together some of the good practice that we've had. We will hope to have the safety officer and some other child sexual exploitation and safeguarding experts helping running that training as well. So that will be probably by Zoom at that stage, but that's something that we've got planned for September. Okay. Recommendation 5 was just about Director of Children's Services and asking that healthy relationships and sex education were included within school curriculum. That was done quite some time ago. Then there's recommendation 6 was about sharing the LGA toolkit. So that was tackling CSE, need to look at, well, that's the most up to date now, and then also a document by NSPCC. What we didn't want to do was just to send it off to members in isolation. That will then go out with that invitation to the September training. So within the next 2 weeks or so, members will get those documents and links to a video that members found useful ahead of the training in September. Recommendation 7 was about a video that I know that some members felt it would be useful that academies should actually share with the students. Vicky Rockall and the Community Safety and Engagement team have done a huge amount of work with young people actually on child sexual exploitation and spotting the signs of exploitation. Okay, so so that will get sent out, the details, but it will also be raised during the training to bring that to life. Okay, recommendation 8 was about that training. It was training for all members, but also refresher training for officers and for members. And that's been done. We're about to refresh the council safeguarding policy, which we do every year. And that will be, this will be face-to-face training and online training that's going to be arranged for September and October with all staff and given for all members as well. Okay. Recommendation 9, that was for Northampton Partnership Homes, and to ensure that officers and relevant board members had got training on how to recognise the signs of CSE and how they should report that. That was done some time ago. Got confirmation that's been done. Recommendation 10, there was a discussion about the benefits of online training. Things have moved on since the scrutiny. There's a lot of training that we'll be sharing and encouraging members to participate in, identifying the most effective training to use. All of it is now free, so either through the county council or through virtual college. There's a virtual college that's been established for that sort of training. So there was discussions about whether you'd have certain officers and certain members would receive specialist training on some of the national good practice to keep on board with that. So that when the training is rolled out in September, there will be opportunities for those members who have a particular interest in the subject, want to know more, to actually have that opportunity to participate. So we'll give you the suite of what's actually out there at the moment. A lot of it is online now. And the last recommendation was that was consult with local community groups and centres and youth groups, look for briefings and training. That's been done very capably by Vicky Rockall and the team, because child sexual exploitation, online bullying and exploitation has been a major feature of all of the community safety presentations that have been done around the schools and academies over the last 2 years or so. So that's a run through of where we are. Slower than I intended, I apologise for that. But certainly a lot of progress has been made, and certainly you will see within the next couple of months when we invite you to the training.
Absolutely, okay. Thank you. I look forward to the training, and hopefully this report can come back to us as the final signed off in November. Yes. Have you got any questions on the report? Catherine?
Thank you, Chair. This is a question for Phil. Phil, have you had any positive or specific feedback about the effectiveness of the training that is being carried out in schools, or what sort of training they would need? And do you know if the police have actually been able to, for want of a better word, identify and save a child or a family from the situation?
I think the feedback from everything I've seen about the impact on young people in the schools has been, whether it's about knife crime or whether it's exploitation, bullying, those sort of issues, has been incredibly successful. What Vicky's organised is multi-agency presentations, so really interesting, thought-provoking, delivered by experts from the different professions. So certainly I've seen feedback on from Vicky on that, and it has been really good. We can probably get that circulated after the meeting, so you can be aware of what people are saying and what impact it has. Certainly, looking at what the RISE team do, many of you will remember Rich Tompkins, who's was the service manager for the RISE team. He's now the head of safeguarding for Northamptonshire Police. And you know how focused Rich was on disrupting and preventing child sexual exploitation. We know that the work that the RISE team has done in schools with teachers, with parents, does make a difference. It does make people more alert to the risks and equips them to deal with it. All of you that attended the training and heard the recording of a presentation from a victim of sexual exploitation will know how sophisticated the grooming of young people is. And actually, I think the more people that can learn more about how that is done and the risks and the signs, the better. But you know, I know from that certainly the RISE team and all the work that's going on will save lives and protect people from abuse.
Okay, thank you very much, Phil. Zoe, you've got a question too, please.
Hiya, yeah, thank you very much for that. I'm just it's the same point I've been making on loads of things. I'm just checking that we're feeding into the West Northants Authority stuff about this connection between different groups and different agencies to make sure that information is shared as much as it can be within the boundaries of confidentiality, because it's an issue with all things, but with CSE particularly, we know that the problem came and the huge issues came from information not being shared. And it could be, I just think it's one of the strongest things we could do going forward as we become one group, is to just look at making sure that all of the agencies and all of the groups are talking to each other, no matter what role.
Yep. So absolutely, you'll know that we've talked before, Councillor Smith, about the intelligence-led work that the private sector housing enforcement team does with the police. And I saw an email today about from the police about a series of operations that they're now planning with their officers over the coming weeks. So that carries on behind the scenes. We say a lot about the importance of professional curiosity. You're inspecting some food premises, but there's accommodation above that, and something that somebody says just makes you think that's really odd, and you then report it. On the approach to enforcement, we're certainly building links with Daventry, for example. We're sharing information, we're doing joint operations. We're at the moment, some of you'll be aware that on the Rust sleeping, we just formed a working relationship with International Lighthouse that used its native speakers in the context of the East Europeans who are sleeping rough. And actually, we suspect that what that close working is doing may highlight modern slavery affecting some of the people that we're dealing with that we've not seen before. So you're absolutely right, Councillor Smith. It is about sharing information appropriately, and the law does enable us to do that to prevent or detect crime. And certainly we're going into West Northamptonshire with the idea that we'll take the best practice from each authority and make sure that we operate across those old boundaries from day one. but there is some really good work being done between the police and regulatory services and housing.
Great, thank you very much, Phil. And the final question from the chair of this working group, which is Councillor Meredith.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I would like to say how delighted I am that the 11 recommendations that we put forward as a committee have been dealt with. I think that's a really brilliant result, and certainly would like to thank Mr. Harris for his input. We have to remember, and I think this is worth me saying this, Chair, this started from a training exercise we had, must be over 2 years ago, when we heard from Rich, the police inspector, about child exploitation. And from there, we set it up at Overview and Scrutiny, and we've done lots and lots of work. I'm very delighted that this will not be lost, that this will be taken over by the Shadow Authority, because it is very important for us on the Borough Council to make sure that this is never going to be lost, because the work we done was tremendous. The only one thing, Mr. Harris, is that I am really worried about. Oh, and by the way, the training that's going to be offered to councillors is, I know, is going to be superb. But one of the things that I am concerned with, especially at this time, is the CCTV cameras within the town centre, because we know that young people flock to the town centre, and that's when these perpetrators home in on them. So I hope the training is going to include the people who monitor the CCTV cameras, so they can spot these perpetrators and can pass it on to the RISE team immediately. Also, Mr. Harris, can you pass on my thanks to Vicky Rockall and her team, because I know that they have worked very, very hard, and this work must carry, as I say, this work must carry on, and I'm very, very satisfied as the chair of this panel that we took this on board, and it has had an excellent result. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Meredith. I think Vicky's on this meeting this evening, so she would have heard those kind words herself. I'm sure in a moment when she comes to speak on another item, she'll probably address that as well. So thank you very much. Okay, so as I said, we'll look at a report again in November to make sure that training's taken place. So item 7, performance management scrutiny. This is where we looked at some of the measures last month, and we asked for further reports. So the first two, again, we're going back to Stephen and Phil for the report on the HML01 and the HML07. It's on those reports, please.
Okay, right, thank you. So I circulated this report with the agenda, so it was just a brief update on the first one. HML01 is the total number of households living in temporary accommodation, something that many of us have lived and breathed for the last 3 years. And also HML07 is the number of households that were prevented from becoming homeless. So it's a constant challenge. On the first one, the number of households in temporary accommodation, we had an action plan to reduce the use and cost of temporary accommodation. People worked really hard on that. We've had less social housing becoming available for homeless households or for other people on the housing register than we were anticipating. Probably more than 100, at least 100 homes less during the year than we were expecting. And that's in spite of Northampton Partnership Homes building more than 100 extra homes during the year. So, so a lot of action was taken. We had successes in persuading people to stay homeless at home, to get the same priority for rehousing as if they were in temporary accommodation, but stay with their families for longer when they would otherwise have definitely become homeless because the relationship was breaking down. And we were very successful in the loss of assured short-hold tenancies, the breaking down of that where landlords serve notice. We were more successful than previous years at persuading landlords to retain their tenants and keep them, or to give us a bit more time to try and find other private rented accommodation. So, and although we were prepared to offer financial incentives to landlords to do that, actually we found that most of it, the success was not about the money, but it was about the solutions we found between the landlords and tenants. So that was encouraging, but levels of homelessness are still very high because of the shortage of affordable housing. So the figures in 2.3 show how the figures have been, this is to the end of Q3. The figure now I think is 358, 360, so that's 8 months on. We have quite a lot of households, probably about 20, where we would have just, if had it not been for COVID, we would have actually discharged our duty and said, you've had your 28 days, you're intentionally homeless or you're not in priority need. We've held on to those people during COVID, so there's about 20 more than we'd expect. But on the other side, we've obviously had the ban on evictions that ends on the 23rd of August. So we're expecting to see a growing number of people presenting as homeless when that ban ends, but we are trying to make contact with people ahead of the 23rd of August to do that. So it is not great. We have going to Cabinet in August. There will be a report recommending that following the pilot scheme for NPH to buy properties to let to homeless households as a permanent discharge of the duty, we will be recommending that we have a second phase over the coming year to buy a load more properties, and the work goes on to prevent homelessness wherever possible. I've strayed really into the second one, the HML 07, the number of households prevented from becoming homeless. That's probably an underestimate of the actual figure. Those are the ones where people are known to have stayed in accommodation for at least 6 months as a result of our actions. What you see is that the Housing Advice and Options team see a very large number of people, but only a proportion of that, probably about a third, will subsequently go on to get rehoused. A lot of them are prevented from becoming homeless or solve their own problems or lose contact with us. But those are the figures. We will seek to prevent at least 50 households from becoming homeless each month, the equivalent of 600 a year. But there are a lot more that through our advice, they manage to solve their own problems. In terms of temporary accommodation, many of you members will have heard before that so somebody 4 years ago would have looking for 2-bedroom accommodation. If they'd gone into temporary accommodation, they would have gone in for 6 weeks and then been rehoused. If they go into temporary accommodation now, that same 2-bedroom household will probably wait between a year and 14 months before they're rehoused, even with the priority that's given to them as homeless. So that is the issue, the shortage of housing, the steady numbers of people presenting as homeless, and the longer waits in temporary accommodation. But as members will also be aware that although the numbers are still too high, we hardly use bed and breakfast now for any families. We're certainly not putting large numbers of families into Wellingborough bed and breakfast as we did probably 2.5 years ago. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions to Phil or Stephen on those two items? Councillor Russell.
Thank you. But Phil, has there, it might be putting you a bit on the spot, and I'm sorry if it is, has the cause or reason for families becoming homeless changed in the last 2 years? We all know that it can be due to breakdown of relationships, poor financial management, if you can manage when you're on universal credit, but the kind of standard reasons, addiction, substance abuse, has there been any changes to that, please?
Not really. You know, the proportion of people losing their homes through the loss of assured short-term tenancies, or just family breakdown, relationship breakdown, violent relationship breakdown, they've been fairly static for the last couple of years. And our trends tend to sort of match the national trends. What I think will change, Councillor Russell, is over the next 6 months or so, because of COVID, as people come out, the loss of employment will lead to the loss of housing. So whereas there's been quite good levels of employment in Northampton until now, we may find that some of the service sector gets hit very badly, in common with many other parts. And that will be one of the challenges. It will be challenging for those that are landlords as well. So I think I would say that the next 12 months may be quite different to what we've had fairly stable in the last couple of years.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Smith, you've got a question too.
Thank you. Yeah, just wondering off the back of that, I know in terms of whether landlords will struggle to find tenants if so many people are losing their employment, whether it'll lead to them having a sort of a drop in people who are able to afford the kind of prices that landlords have been charging recently. And I'm just wondering whether, as just keeping a close eye on that as it develops, whether it might be a chance to re-push the social lettings agency and encourage more Northampton landlords to go down that sort of route.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think there is the best opportunity to do that. We've got a new manager that is starting to work with those landlords, and we're looking at changing the emphasis of the Landlords Forum to be more focused on people that are letting to people on housing benefit. So I think there are those opportunities, and certainly some of the landlords that we're talking to actually looking for tenants who can afford to pay the rent, and that might be they pay less rent, but they're more reliable. And if we can offer financial incentives, we can certainly keep people in their homes. But also, we are finding, ironically, more recently, that we're able to get more people into private rented accommodation in a number of our teams. So we hope that that flow will increase, and that we will be successful with the team that we've got in negotiating with those landlords that when they are able to evict, that they're persuaded not to evict. Because it could be that by evicting somebody where you could have prevented it, that actually they'd be worse off, because then you've got to find a tenant afterwards. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so, Councillor Anderson, have you got a question?
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully this is the right question, and I'm sure you'll tell me off if it isn't. But anyway, I'm it Councillor Hibbert and also Mr. Harris into the question. We had an issue, I won't say whereabouts it was, but it was within my ward, where there was a house with 6 different homeless people in. 5 of them were evicted, and the other one has been given an eviction, a 7-day eviction order this week. They've been causing numerous problems left, right and centre, beating some of the residents up and all sorts. What can Mr. Harris kind of tell me and assure me, give me his assurances that something's going to be done about this? I know things have been done, and I'm very pleased things have been done over the weekend, but are we just going to fill it again, and are we going to have the same problems and the same issues? This road's been a very happy community for ages, but what worries me is all of a sudden we've had these dreadful incidents within a very short period of time, and there's an awful lot of residents that are very concerned at the moment.
Yeah, so without naming the premises, it relates to a house in multiple occupation, a shared house that is run by a housing provider. So that's a registered housing provider, and they are responsible for vetting the tenants that go in, providing the management support, and minimising any negative impacts on the local community. So we have already relayed our concern to them, and I'm intending to raise it with the chief executive of that organisation, because obviously they run quite a lot of other housing projects for single homeless people, and they've done that quite well in the past. So I hope that with more robust management of the people in there and more careful selection of their tenants, that the problems that you've referred to, Councillor Ansell, are not repeated. As I said, from the council's point of view, we want all of those properties to be well managed, but actually they are independent organisations who are responsible for running those responsibly. But perhaps outside of this meeting, we'll give you an update on that. And rather than just say, "Oh, here's the name of the chief executive," I did agree to contact them to ask for assurances about how that property is being managed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much for that, Phil and Stephen.
Thank you.
Next one was the ESC 06, and that's the Centre of Land and Highways assessed falling below the acceptable levels. So this is Councillor Hannam and Chris Carvell to present this report, please. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair. This is this ES09, I think it is, ES06, sorry, is regarding detritus. And detritus is the kind of stuff with that appears at the side of the road. So long weeds or cuttings, or it's the kind of the mucky bit that's at the side of the road. We were doing quite well. We were doing better than the previous contracts within the first year. And things have, a couple of reasons that things have fallen behind. But it's worth kind of framing everything with our objectives for COVID. So our objectives for COVID were really to keep the main waste collection services running and keep the grass being cut. So that meant there was some disruption to food waste services as we juggled things around. Some disruption absolutely to project work that we were doing, and some disruption as well to the deep cleaning programme. So we managed to get and it's the deep cleaning programme that is really targeting at some of these areas priority for getting rid of the detritus, which is really bad. So we got that back on track back in May, and we've been doing it since. We started with some streets in Far Cotton. Last week we were over in Abbey Street in St James. I think the next few weeks we're towards the Scottish streets in St James, moving on towards Aberdare Road and into sort of Spencer, and then into Abington towards the end of into the summer holidays, towards the end of this month, then into the Mounts, and then then into the Mounts, and that takes us up to kind of the latter part of the year. So that programme should really help get us back on track in terms of detritus. And then when you see the next set of figures, they should be significantly better as well. So it's some limited disruption there, but back on track since May in terms of addressing that. Happy to take any questions, Chairman.
Okay, yeah. Any questions, Councillor Allen, on that item? No, all happy with that. Okay, Councillor Helen, Chris, thank you very much for that information. It's very helpful.
Thanks very much. No problem at all. Have a good rest of your meeting.
Thank you. Okay, so we move on to agenda item 8, is the CSP performance report. And this is the annual report that comes to overview and scrutiny. And I call on Councillor King and Vicky Rockwell to present this report.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I think you probably all had a chance to look through it. As you can see, the last report we gave to was in January. So some of the stuff we have planned for the last few months is obviously been put on hold as we've been organising the COVID Resilience Forum. And thank you so much to the team. They've put in phenomenal work, changing their styles of work and approach. As always, we haven't forgotten about what we were doing, and we've achieved a great amount already over the year. We are looking at some more items to include. Now things are starting to slightly settle down. So if you see the last item is the specific pieces of work that will take place in the next 3 months. Just to add as well, the child sexual exploitation stuff that Phil Harris was talking about earlier, the young people work we've been doing with the schools is actually just over 500 year 6 secondary school and primary school children that we've actually engaged with, and the feedback has been phenomenal from both the young people and from the teachers as well. And to mention that we've also had 180 secondary school children from Western Fayval Academy that have attended as well. So we're hoping that work will continue, but we are, as you will see in that last item, looking at developing a virtual school event as well. Vicky, do you want to add anything in?
No, I just think I'd just bring to your attention that the report covers, obviously it covers the activity from the last 6 months, so from January up until the end of June, but the statistics cover the performance year. So that would be from the 1st of April 2019 to the 31st of March 2020. So obviously we've just got a 3-month delay there, but it gives you a fairer view of the statistics, because obviously if you had the last 3 months, they would look very different as a result of COVID-19. So I just wanted to point that out. I think, to be fair, I think the information's in there, and the conclusion kind of summarises it quite nicely. You know, just in terms of our crime statistics, you know, when compared to other areas of a similar demographic, are no better or worse. And although we've seen a very slight increase in overall crime, for many of the individual specific crime types, there's been an improvement in comparison to the previous year's performance. We have still got some challenges around violent crime and social behaviour and youth violence, but the Community Safety Partnerships just set its strategic plan for the next 12 months and an action plan which seeks to address violent crime and social behaviour and youth violence. So yeah, I think the rest of it's in the report.
Okay, I can see Catherine Russell, you've got your hand up, so I'll come to you in a moment. But I've just got some questions I want to ask myself and Councillor Kilby-Shaw as well. I'll ask this one before Councillor yours comes in, but did the Marshall scheme restart in the last couple of weeks with the pubs reopening, or is that delayed? Do you know a date when Jay's Jetty is going to be gated up now that it was passed by planning? And my final one is, when will you find out about the purple flag?
Do you want me to answer those, Anna?
Oh, I don't mind, either or, I'm not bothered.
So I'll make a start if you want to add. So the taxi marshal scheme started on the 4th of July. So the first night that the pubs opened in town, we commenced, the contract started. So they're working slightly earlier. So in the report it reflects a later time, but they're working from 7 PM to 1 AM, which is a lot more reflective of our nighttime economy at the moment. They also work this weekend. And potentially they're going to work next weekend as well, and then they'll revert back to working the end of the month, so pay weekend and bank holiday. That's the taxi marshal. The purple flag. So we were due to have the assessment just before lockdown, literally just before lockdown, they were due to visit. So they couldn't because of lockdown. It's been extended, so we've still got the purple flag, but as and when they are reassessing, they've done a tabletop exercise, and I don't think they'll award us it again from the tabletop exercise. I think they're waiting to come out again, but they will resume that as soon as they can. And the third question was in relation to, I've forgotten.
Days Jetty.
Days Jetty.
Yeah.
So the plan has now been approved. As soon as we received confirmation from the planning committee that was approved, we got the gates on order. So we'd already done the procurement exercise to get those started. So they've started. They're near complete. We're just looking at the wording of the plaque, and we are finalising the waste management strategy, which we needed to do for the bins that are at the back of the alleyway. That's near complete. So in answer to your question, very, very, very soon.
Yeah. That's great, thank you. Councillor Russell.
Thank you very much. It's about being COVID-19 safe. We've had some very confusing and mixed messages from the government about what we need to do to remain COVID safe. So I'd like to know what steps the Community Safety Partnership has had to take to ensure that members of its team, where possible, are COVID safe. And in particular, taxi drivers, are they expected to wear masks? Thank you.
So in relation to the taxi drivers, I believe they should be public transport. It's not my area, Councillor Russell, but looking at the guidance, I'd assume that yes, they should be. In terms of staff, do you mean the team? In terms of making them COVID secure?
I mean anybody who comes into contact with the public and keeping the public and themselves safe.
So all staff, where possible, working from home. So that includes all of my team. We have been out supporting very recently, within the last few weeks, been supporting the police with a day of action in St David's, a knife amnesty today. So the team are going out and supporting partners with that. The risk assessment's done every time the staff go out. Staff, are aware of the measures to keep themselves safe. And in terms of engaging with the public, again, they know to adhere to the guidance around social distancing, and the team are very well trained and aware of those measures. Does that answer your question?
It's the best we can do at the moment. Thank you.
Can I just add into that as well? We have got the Northants Together resources pack, and the bid have also put that back together, which has gone out to local businesses and organisations, just with simple messages about keeping safe. Obviously, they're changing daily, weekly, but we've got measures in place with the footprint, so people are keeping their distance. The key organisations around the town are extremely responsible. We've had some great engagement around that, but that doesn't really fit into this report. It's more Derek Simpson's area. So yeah, I can see they're connected, but it's slightly different. But we're doing everything we possibly can do, and with the event side of stuff, we're monitoring stuff daily, weekly, the bigger events, to see what we can possibly do. But keeping the public safe at all times is the greatest concern.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Councillor Kilby-Shaw, what's your question, please?
Okay. Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of questions, if that's okay. The first thing I noticed is in the report it says domestic violence accounts for 1/3 of all violent offences, and the percentage has increased by 14.5% to the year to March. I was just wondering, is that putting any pressure on sheltered accommodation at all? And I was also wondering, is the proportion of male to female victims in line with the statistics published by the ONS in November, which was 1/3 male and 2/3 female victims? Thank you.
I mean, so the second part of your question, in terms of does Northampton's figures reflect the national figures around male and female victims? I don't know the answer to that. I can find that out for you. And in terms of domestic violence generally and the increase around that, you said was you referring to refuge? Is it having an impact on refuge accommodation? Is that
yes, that's correct. Yeah.
So interestingly, obviously, so there are figures in the report don't include the COVID figures. So we've seen about an 7 to 8% increase in domestic abuse since lockdown, and that's in line with the national average. I can provide some reassurance around that, and that is that increase has been on the lower part. So disputes, verbal disputes, rather than on the high end. So we put victims, we rank them, don't we, in terms of risk. So those increases we've seen at the lower end, and some of that also it's not necessarily partners. Some of it is family members as well. Obviously, you know, with the pressures that have been around lockdown. So Eve and NDAS, Northamptonshire Domestic Abuse Service, who provide the refuge provision for us in the town, haven't suggested that there's a huge impact on refuge at this time. They are monitoring, they are looking at longer term solutions, and I know Phil Harris's team are doing some work around that, because they've got some national funding that, you know, they're developing some responses to that. But as it stands, we're in contact regularly with the domestic abuse services in the town, and we haven't heard anything to suggest that they've got that there's issues and they can't cope with the demand.
Okay, thank you. Could I have a supplementary, please, Chair?
Yes, you can.
Regarding the refuges, how much capacity is left over in case there's an increase the longer this crisis goes on in domestic violence?
Yeah, that's exactly something that Phil's team's been looking at in terms of accommodation and temporary accommodation generally, to try and look in longer term to that provision, something that's more sustainable. And you're right, you know, if this goes on for a longer period, you know, and should we need additional provision, that is something that Phil and his team are looking at and are working, as I said, working with NDAS, who have got some national funding to support. We should be able to
thank you very much.
Pardon me on that.
Okay,
yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Ansell, what's your question, please?
Yes, Chairman. My question is, I know purple flags matter, and I hope green ones do as well. Just prior to the lockdown, all the green flags were lowered. This was in the event in case the Queen passed away or the Duke of Edinburgh passed away. Can I be assured that they are now flying proudly in all the parks that have, like I say, had this flag bestowed on them?
I will ask that for you, Councillor Ansell. I'm sure it's not a problem, because we are in Love Park Week and we've got some extra flags that are out. So let me get onto that immediately for you and get you an answer.
Thank you very much. A little supplementary. That is, Jay's Fluid, very pleased to hear that we're getting it gated. Will we be having a good old clean down with Jay's Fluid prior to the gates going up?
We absolutely will be.
Jolly good, thank you.
Okay, Felix. Oh, no, he's gone. Okay, okay, thank you very much for that. So moving on to the next item then, which is
Chair. I hope Southfields can have a green flag.
Well, you have to earn it, Councillor Meredith, I'm afraid. Can't just have it put up. Okay, so moving on to the next item, which is an update on the scrutiny report. I know because of the COVID, the two working groups haven't met for a while, but I know we've got the food poverty one, I believe, next week, and knife crime this week. But we've got the two sort of updates in front of you. I'll go to the first one first, which is the food poverty one, which I think, Dennis, you were leading on. Is there anything you want to update us on, or are you going to wait till after you've had your next meeting?
Yeah, I think because it's been quite some time, Chair, we need to have a meet when we meet next week. We'll have more thing because it seems to have been just on hold. So next week, and then I can report back and give an update.
Lovely, thank you very much. And then 9B, the knife crime. I know we're meeting on Wednesday, I believe it is. Graham, is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. No, more or less the same as Dennis with the North crime. We have a meeting on Thursday. We have got some core questions that have been answered from the police and also from the youth offending place. So we'll be listening to that, and then we'll come back to you all with a full report when that's done after Thursday. So thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you very much. And then 9B, the pre-decision scrutiny on the working group trial of buyback. We met early this afternoon. We had a good brief on what was going on from Phil and Councillor Hibbett. The working group did agree to meet once more in August before the next cabinet meeting. Sorry, the cabinet meeting in August. Have a final look at it. So that's 9C. Then we move on to item 10, which is the draft overview and scrutiny annual report. And a copy has been circulated. This is the annual report we do, just highlighting what we've been up to over the past 12 months. And could I thank Tracy for all her hard work that's gone into scrutiny, not only over the past year, but over the last, how long has it been, Tracy? 13, 14 years, something like that. So well done. And, you know, our scrutiny is held up and is really put on a pedestal by the Centre for Public Scrutiny. And that is all down to Tracy and the hard work and support she gives us as a committee. But also I'd like to thank you as members of the committee, because I say it every year, but scrutiny only works when you've got people who are dedicated and enthusiastic and knowledgeable about the subjects that we are investigating, that really brings it to life. It'd be very dull if we were looking at subjects that didn't really ignite us and fire us up. So thank you for your support, and thank you for all the hard work you've done, not only this year, but all the years you've been on scrutiny. So has anybody got anything I'd like to say on this report? I will be presenting it to full council, I think next week or week after. Catherine.
I'd like to endorse your comments about Tracy's hard work, her ability to work with a number of different councillors, a number of different people, professionals and external bodies, and most importantly, the fact that she's able to put it down in reports for us. We're only as good as our research, and I think Tracy does a fantastic job. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you, Catherine. Is Dennis indicating? I imagine he is. Dennis,
No, I also must add my thanks to you, Jamie, as the chair. You've led us very diligently, and it's been absolutely brilliant way the scrutiny has worked. We've had so many issues over the years, and as you say, Tracy has been a key figure, and I think we're very lucky to have her. And she knows my feelings. You know, I've expressed this about scrutiny to her, how she puts the input and how we can give these reports that you presented today. Absolutely brilliant. And thanks to everybody. I mean, also thanks to the councillors who have attended the scrutiny. I mean, sometimes it's, you know, it can be very difficult meetings, but I think the way scrutiny has gone on the Borough Council is absolutely tremendous. And I just hope that when the shadow authority, the scrutiny carries on there, we can carry on in the same way, because there's lessons they can learn from us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. And I know you were on the shadow overview and scrutiny committee. So with you there, myself and Tracy, and a few of the others who are here tonight on this committee, Penny, and of course, we've got Jane Birch chairing it. Hopefully, the Northampton Borough Council way of scrutiny will continue into the new authority. Let's hope so. Anybody else want to speak on the report? So we'll be presenting it at full council next time. Okay, so item 11, potential for future pre-scrutiny work. There is nothing that I know about. There are no urgent items. So unless there are any more questions, I'll close the meeting at 5:05. Thank you for your attendance.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.